The program is State Affairs, coming to you from State Affairs Studios here in Ibadan. So wherever you are listening to me, I welcome you. Did you miss the last edition of the program? You would listen to it if you went to my YouTube page. My name is Edmondo Pillow. I want to give someone that is going through hopelessness some form of hope. At the moment, many have lost faith in Nigeria. To them, a dark cloud passes across the light of hope in the face of the misfortunes of poverty, unemployment, weak leadership, and unprecedented violence. To these ones, the feeling of joy has taken a long trip to the abyss, and their ears have been deafened by the boson of helplessness. I say stay cool. In times like this, the assured way to survival is to sharpen one's wit and not let the mind drift like a whiff of smoke in a dusty atmosphere. By this, one comes up with refreshing ideas for sustainable living. Don't gorge yourself on too much fear of the future. Hold on to today as the light into the future. To be hopeful is to have a plan to live for tomorrow. Remember, your thoughts determine your feeling. I say stay cool. There are different stories coming out of Nigeria that discourages one from being hopeful. But I say be hopeful. And I want to look at one of such stories on this edition of the program. And I'll be happy to receive your contribution. I'll be happy to hear from you. I'll be happy to read your comments. I want this to be an engagement between you and me. And we can do that. You can call me, you can leave your comments. It's about corruption. In recent time, I've been reading the works I've written on corruption in the last 15 years. From my assessment, it is worsening by the day. And you can blame no one but the political leadership. The moral fabric of the country is being destroyed in an infernal scale. And the political leadership don't give a damn. The pervasive issue of contract scams involving government officials, contractors, lawyers, and other agents is a malice that plagues several countries in Africa, leading to the detrimental effects on the economy, education, healthcare, and various sectors crucial for national development. Are you with me? Let me see who is watching. I am talking about orchestrated exploitation scheme. Schemes built within the corridors of power. And these schemes result in dire consequences that impede progress and squander public resources. Are you following the massive violence that is taking place in the north, in Kaduna, in Benue, in Zamfara, in Borno? Death works on four legs in these places. Have you taken a look at our public schools, our universities, our hospitals? They are in terrible state. Yet every 4 years we'll come back to organize elections to install more fraudulent government officials. Let's look at a case in point. It is about the Process and Industrial Developments Limited, known as P&ID. It's a saga, and this saga would have cost Nigeria more than $11 billion, and Nigeria would have lost that money to scammers in government quarters collaborating with foreigners to wreak havoc on the national purse. This whole deal started as a $6.6 billion gas supply and processing agreement with the shadowy British Virgin Island firm P&ID. Are you following the story? It's a developing story. And this edition of the program, I might not mention names. But in due course, I will mention names. I want to see if the Bola Ahmed Tinubu will prosecute these names. Or is it the normal? The Umaru Yar'Adua government signed the gas supply agreement in January 2010 to boost power generation through the refinement and deployment of gas to the national grid. Nigeria and P&ID did not fulfill their obligations in the deal, leading to the collapse of the deal. The collapse of the deal did not bode well with the British company, and it filed a suit against Nigeria in March 2013 in a British arbitration court. The company had claimed that Nigeria violated the terms of its agreement by not providing gas for the power plant. Can you see? Providing gas for the power plant. Is P&ID a briefcase company? The company argued that the alleged violation frustrated the construction of the gas project and deprived it the potential benefit expected from 20 years' worth of gas supplies with anticipated profits of $5 to $6 billion. Having been convinced of the claims of P&ID, the tribunal awarded the company a compensation of $6.6 billion in 2017 against Nigeria for not performing its obligations, as stated in the contract. As of this year, the fine, along with interest, had accrued to about $11.5 billion. Justice Emeka is watching. Agwo Turumbe is watching. Adewale Oladoyin Ben, thank you for joining the broadcast. So worried by the huge compensation, fraudulent civil servants, fraudulent public officials, and fraudulent lawyers involved in the case, Nigerian lawyers for that matter, convinced the Goodluck Jonathan government to enter into an out-of-tribunal agreement for the payment of $850 million to P&ID and its collaborators. The payment of the negotiated amount was passed on to the Muhammadu Buhari administration, but the Buhari government refused to pay the money on suspicion of serious underhand dealings around the deal. Buhari set aside the settlement agreement and challenged the enforcement of the award before the English Commercial Court. In the process, the London court added $2.4 billion in interest, making it $9 billion that Nigeria will pay P&ID. But the judge granted Nigeria's request for a stay on any asset seizures as it challenges the earlier ruling. To ensure the stay of judgment, the court also ordered Nigeria to pay $200 million to it within 60 days. All this was to stop the British Virgin Islands-based company from seizing Nigeria's international assets. You seize a country's assets. Just like that. On the 23rd of October 2023, a United Kingdom judge, Robin Knowles, of the Business and Property Court in London, ruled that the award was obtained by fraud, saying that the case is contrary to public policy. This is what the judge said. I quote him. This case has also sadly brought together a combination of examples of what some individuals do for money. The judge says, driven by greed and prepared to use corruption, giving no thought to what their enrichment would mean in terms of harm for others. Did you get the judge's opinion? In subsequent editions of the program, I'll be extraying the details of the judgment. For this edition, I'm giving you background into the subject matter. You will see fraud in action. Fraud perpetrated by those who ought to protect the Nigerian state. Fraud perpetrated by lawyers even hired to protect the Nigerian state. All they are interested in is getting their shares from the compensation. What has happened to Nigeria will require something drastic to fix it. It appears democracy is worsening the situation, but that is not to say that I have seen any form of government better than a democracy. Unfortunately, Nigeria's democracy is also a fraud. However, it is the responsibility of the people to correct the fraudulent democracy we run at the moment. But for now, we can make do with it as we reform it. I am looking at the P&ID scam that would have cost Nigeria more than 11 billion. How much do we have in our reserve for us to pay a company a compensation of more than $11 billion when we cannot rehabilitate primary and secondary schools scattered around the country? It is the story of Nigeria. It is the story of fraud, and it's the story of government. Look at what the judge said. I want to repeat. The UK judge says this case has also sadly brought together a combination of examples of what some individuals would do for money, driven by greed and prepared to use corruption, giving no thought to what their enrichment would mean in terms of harm for others. If Buhari had not been pressured, if Buhari had not refused the pressure, that's mounting pressure to settle with P&ID. If Buhari had not ordered a legal battle in a UK court, Nigeria would have lost over $15 billion. And that is almost half of Nigeria's external reserve. And you will lose it to a portfolio or a briefcase company and its allies. At the core of this scam lie different forms of corrupt practices. Dishonest government officials in collusion with unscrupulous contractors and conniving lawyers exploit the system by forging contracts, inflating costs, or executing substandard work in the guise of fulfilling obligations or not fulfilling them. These deceitful maneuvers serve the selfish interest of a few, while gravely undermining the development of the Nigerian state. Should I say well done to Buhari on this matter? I think he deserves some credit here. Buhari stood his ground, saying, "No, I suspect fraud here." And Buhari ordered the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission to have a thorough forensic audit of the deal. What is the consequences of this kind of scams? The economy, the bedrock of a nation's prosperity, is affected by these insidious schemes. When funds meant for infrastructural development, public projects, and vital services are siphoned away through fraudulent contracts, the economic growth of a nation is strangulated. And you can see what Nigeria is going through. You can see the pains in the faces of people. It's a consequences of the fraudulent system we run. Fraud perpetrated in the presidency, fraud perpetrated in the ministries, in state governors' offices, fraud perpetrated in National Assembly, in houses of assembly, in companies, in places of worship. Fraud is written in the Nigerian sky. Fraud is a culture in Nigeria. It is happening in buses. It is happening on the street. Nigerians have become fraudulent in their dealings with each other. Such is the value system we run. I am thinking that this will require drastic solutions. I don't know the form it will take. Embezzlement and misallocation of funds derail budget. You can see Tinubu had to submit a budget wanting to spend 5 billion to purchase a yacht. A yacht to where? Oh, it is for the Navy, not for the presidency. You know, contract scams lead to scarcity of funds for critical sectors. They hinder investment in roads, electricity, and water supply, which are vital for economic expansion. You can see our highways are in terrible state. Our inner roads are bad. Note that it was the EFCC that took up the battle with Process and Industrial Development Limited over the judgment against Nigeria. A former petroleum minister, the late Rwani Lukman, and Grace Taiga, who was the ministry's director of legal services, were indicted by EFCC investigation for receiving backhand funds to facilitate the deal and for contravening the Infrastructure Concession Regulatory Commission Act. Lawyers assigned to defend Nigeria's interest were similarly accused of compromise. You will see interesting. Abeza Chaso be nice watching. Dayo Dada says, good afternoon, the radio man. In the midst of abject poverty that the previous and this government has put Nigerians into, that they labeled us the capital of poverty. They are buying cars and yachts, renovations of existing buildings with billions for their enjoyment. Why they turn the people to Amajiris, beggars? Diodada says we have the highest IDPs in the world when we are not at war. We are at war. We are at war. We've been at war. I was listening to the governor of Borno State recently saying that in Borno we still have about 1 million internally displaced persons. And I know he's just conservative with the number. If you have 1 million displaced persons, the population of Gabon is about 3 million. And you have 1 million displaced persons in one state, Borno State. Before Samuel Otom left as governor of Benue State, he disclosed that there were 2 million internally displaced persons in Benue. Something needs to give. Something needs to give. Keep your messages coming. Olayode, thank you for joining the broadcast. Samuel Atunjo says he's listening from Badagry, Lagos State. Omobolaji Abdulsalam, thank you for joining the broadcast. Aaron Agu is watching live from Tel Aviv, Israel. How is Tel Aviv, Aaron Agu? How is the Israeli-Palestinian crisis shaping out? Olayode says, Radio Man, I'm happy to be in class this afternoon because your intro explicitly say almost about my current state of living in the land called Nigeria. Olayode, is it a bad? I'm sorry about that. Very sorry. Be hopeful. Pedro Olayemi Babawale, Pedro, thank you for always being there. Pedro, you always share the program, and we appreciate you here. Thank you. Adekunle Olushina says, good to be here this afternoon, Radio Man. I'm happy you're here. Clement Elizabeth, thank you for joining the broadcast. Omotayo Oluwarotimi Onobamiro is watching. Thank you. The focus of this edition of the program is the P&ID Contract Scam. I'm giving you a background to the subject. I said a former petroleum minister, the late Rwanda Lukman, and Grace Tiger, who was the ministry's director of legal services, were indicted by EFCC investigation on the contract. And they were indicted for facilitating the deal. They collected money to facilitate the deal. And if you watch most of the contracts going on in government agencies, somebody is collecting money to facilitate deals against the country. That is why you see roads will be constructed within 1 or 2 years. The roads are broken up. They have broken down. And you have ministry officials that ought to monitor the quality of the contract. But because they've collected money, nobody's doing their work. Members of the National Assembly will collect theirs. It's a fraudulent country. Fraudulent elections. But somehow, we can make things right. So, having investigated, the FCC discovered shadiness and hollowness of the claims of P&ID. So Nigeria began to investigate the company using the EFCC. And in the process, the EFCC discovered 2 bank transfers totaling $20,000 made by Dublin-based Industrial Consultants Limited. And that company is part of the P&ID group of companies. So that money was sent to Grace Tiger, a Nigerian government lawyer who oversaw the award of the gas plant contract. So this encouraged the EFCC to challenge the payment of the compensation awarded to P&ID. The EFCC also found that the payments in 2017 and 2018 were made on grounds of fraud. And the transfer was purportedly for medical costs. So using this evidence, Nigeria filed fraud challenge against P&ID. Will Nigeria try some of those that have been found to have worked against Nigeria, even the lawyers in this case? Will they be tried? The EFCC, having thoroughly investigated the deal, concludes that it was a highly orchestrated scam. Are they going to sweep this under the carpet as usual? Ministers, agencies, lawyers were involved. The EFCC has called it a highly orchestrated scam. So what will it do? The EFCC wonders why P&ID lawyers have not been able to prove that it legitimately and lawfully secured a 20-year contract worth hundreds of millions of naira. Using the words of the EFCC, the company has yet to even demonstrate that they had the credentials in the first place to carry out such a complex arrangement, nor provide any evidence of tangible investment or land holding. That means, does P&ID have the capacity to execute that contract? That's one of the points the EFCC is making. You see, these corrupt practices diminish public trust in government institutions. So Nigerians don't trust government anymore. Even when government is working, Nigerians don't believe anymore. I don't blame anybody. Recently I went to Fashola Agribusiness and Industrial Hub in your West local government area to see what the Seyi Makinde government is doing in that sector. I saw what is going on there, and I've been posting the pictures, but I can still see many doubting Thomases. I don't blame them. They don't trust government anymore. Some will say, White Elephant Project. Yes, it can be if government abandons it. And we have seen government abandon projects that it has spent billions of naira on. But for me, the fact is that I've also told myself I will go out in search of some positives, because almost all the stories are negative and it causes hopelessness. So as a journalist, I said, okay, I will also focus on the positive of any government. Like, this is a positive on the part of Buhari's government. This is a positive. It's a patriotic zeal on the part of Buhari to say, no, I will not accept this fraud. It is also patriotic on the part of Seyi Makinde to say, no, we can spend billions of loans that we collected on a revolutionary agri project that will lift people out of poverty. And for me, it's a positive to go and see how the money is being spent. The point I'm making, Nigerians have lost trust in government. Even when government is telling the truth, you don't believe. Because government is known for telling the wrong stories. This kind of fraud breeds cynicism and disillusionment among the citizens. It erodes faith in governance structures. When individuals entrusted with national resources exploit them for personal gain, it undermines the principles of good governance, accountability, and transparency. And we need these principles for building a robust and sustainable society. What this P&ID case has revealed is that corrupt government officials, civil servants, consultants, and lawyers connive with briefcase companies. And when I talk about briefcase companies, companies without the resources and structures to execute the kind of contract they enter into to steal from Nigeria. To address these pervasive issues, stringent enforcement of anti-corruption laws, independent oversight, and transparency in awarding contracts are essential. Building robust systems that prioritize accountability, ethical governance, and strict punitive measures for those involved in corrupt practices can help stem this pervasive malice. A concerted effort is required from citizens, government agencies, and the legal system to combat this nefarious web of corruption, ultimately leading to a brighter, more transparent, and accountable future for Nigeria. I would say this is part 1 of my analysis on the P&ID scam. I will come with part 2, and part 2 will be more revealing. So always stay with me. This program runs every Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 2 p.m. We did not broadcast on Wednesday due to circumstances beyond our control. And if you have missed previous edition of the program, you can just scroll down this page and you would be able to catch up. You can also go on my YouTube page at E. Obilo. Subscribe to the page. Let's take some calls. I want to hear from you before I delve into another subject. Remember, on Monday, I discussed this book. On Monday. S.L.A. Akintola in the Eyes of History, a biography and postscript. It is a vivid and detailed description of the life of Samuel Ladoke Akintola from birth to his death. The book describes his complex life, his politics, and his convoluted relationship with Chief Obafemi Awolowo. S.L.A. Akintola in the Eyes of History is a historical narrative of Akintola as a hero and a victim of his own principles and populism. S.L.A. Akintola was a premier of the Western region. He was killed in the January 15, 1966 coup. If you are interested in reading about him, you can get this book. Get this book from udarabooks.com, or you can get it through Udara Books WhatsApp numbers. And those numbers are flashed on the screen, so you can call the numbers. You can call on WhatsApp. Let us know what you think about the P&ID Contract Scam. This is a lovely book for you. So you can call and join the broadcast. Another book here is Of Rust and Gold. Of Rust and Gold by the same author. That is Femi Kehinde. Femi Kehinde was here on Monday to discuss this book of Rust and Gold. So, you can also get this book, Snippets of History. Of Rust and Gold is a collection of articles on Yoruba cultural and political history. It is a collection of work on contemporary Nigerian politics as well. So you get this work and you are closer to history. It's a classical work on history. So call 080 18449, 080 18449. Let's hear from you. That's the number to call. 08999 And you can also call 070 1294 1837. You can call on WhatsApp. If you are outside the country, don't forget the country's international code. That is +234. So we'd like to hear from you. I'm talking about the P&ID scam. While we wait for your call, I want us to listen to Professor Nii Oshudari on the power of reading, what reading does to the mind. You know, reading is like feeding the mind. Reading is like an excursion into the unknown to know. What reading does is to humble you and set your mind rolling on the path of education and information. Reading inspires me to test my ideas. Reading introduced me to great minds to broaden my horizon. So what does reading also do to Professor Nii Oshudari, that renowned professor of English? Let's listen to him.
It was Frederick Douglass, one of my favorite early African-American writers. He was a slave. He was prevented from reading and writing. Oh yes, flogged many times when he was trying to do so. And then his master's wife, who wanted to teach him, was vilified by the husband. They sent their own child to school. They sent him to the plantation. But he said, the more they tried to prevent me from doing it, the more I wanted to do it.
Better.
You know, and he was an autodidact. He taught himself and became one of the best writers of the 19th century. So much so, the American government recognized him. Didn't they even make him some kind of ambassador? You read what that man wrote, you just wondered, how did he have the education to read all the texts that he was quoting?
Prof, that brings me to a fundamental point. Reading. What does reading do to the mind?
It builds, we were talking about education. Yes, it builds the mind, it nurtures it. I believe very much that reading is like eating. If you haven't eaten for a long time, what happens? You get hungry. The longer that hunger, the more your desire to eat. It should be the same thing with reading. If you haven't read for a long, long time, you should become hungry for books. And the more you kept away from books, the more you really want to read. When we had military dictatorship here, and at times our lives were in danger, one of the things I feared most was, it's not incarceration. Oh yeah, take you away, whatever. My life is simple. No, but being prevented from reading, because I knew that would kill me. I don't think any day passes on which I don't read one thing or another or write something. You know, reading nurtures the mind, and it nurtures the soul, and it improves your heartbeat. It is so organic and so multidimensional in its effect. It is extremely important. It makes you hungry. The hunger for knowledge. The hunger for knowledge. Yes. Now, Frederick Douglass again, the guy I was talking about. one of his narratives, memoirs. He said he studied the psychology of his master, while his master didn't want him to read at all. And he knew that his master knew the power of education. Because, in fact, the master said it. Said, "You're teaching this slave to know." The moment he knows how to read, nothing you tell him will satisfy him. He will be asking questions. He will be... So he was 9, and he heard all that. He said, if that is all the evils of education, I want those evils. And he taught himself how to read and write. He became a happier man. He became an abolitionist. So reading is important. My problem, again, with Nigerian rulers is that they do not read. If you are a reading, enlightened president, the major universities in your country wouldn't go on strike for 8 months and you would just carry on business as usual. No. It is important that you read. Some of the most advanced countries in the world have advanced because they've been led by literate, educated people. Franz Mitterrand, when he was the president of France, people used to laugh. They said, "Oh well, he didn't just talk; he will philosophize." When Gabriel Garcia Marquez, the great Colombian novelist, visited Bill Clinton for the first time, I think for a substantial portion of their first meeting, they were talking literature. Bill Clinton had read him. What about Barack Obama? Yeah, it is not likely that you will grab a writer and throw him or her in jail and say, rot there. If you know the value of books, the value of education, and the value of learning. The problem with our country is that we've been ruled by illiterates, but these are illiterates who are able to sign their names.
Are you saying educated illiterates?
Educated. Yeah, contradiction in terms. Educated illiterates. But educated, if they were educated, I think they will cease being illiterate. Really? Yeah. Why?
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
Yes, that's Professor Niyo Shudari there. Do not forget that in the last 2 months, I have focused this program on understanding the person of Obafemi Awolowo. And my resource person has been Dr. Yemi Farumbi. We've done 5 weeks of comprehensive analysis on Awolowo. And this week, I began to bring in Akintola into the story. The reason I invited Femi Kendi, and in discussing Awolowo, the names like Azikiwe, Amadu Bello, Tafawa Balewa are coming into the story. The first military coup is coming into the story. The idea is to help us understand our past, for us to build a great future. As we go, I will focus on Ojukwu. I would focus on Nnamdi Azikiwe. We'll come to the Second Republic. Who is Alhaji Shehu Shagari? What led to the 1983 coup? We'll look at those subjects. And as we do the analysis of the past, we will not forget issues of the moment. Like the P&ID judgment is an issue of the moment. Remember, a court judgment favors Nigeria, but P&ID also has the right to appeal the judgment. So it is not over yet. It is not over yet. So in continuation of the analysis of Awolowo, I want to look at a subject that is of interest to me as a media man. It's about the politics and the establishment of Western Nigerian Television. How did Awolowo come to establish the first television station in Africa? What led to it? So walk with me as I give you this analysis. The fear of transformative reforms by the Nigerian leadership is linked to the stunted development of the Nigerian state. The situation offers the people the choices of progress and despair. But what is paramount is the ability of leadership to search the past for the solutions of the problems of today and the problems that will come tomorrow. This is how states are constructed for progress. A point I want to look at is the resilience and argument of leaders of the Western region and how their ideas led to the innovations accommodated in the Letontin Constitution of 1954. What started as a confrontation between Obafemi Awolowo and Governor Macpherson would lead to the removal of broadcasting from the exclusive list, as it was in 1953, and moved to the concurrent list in the 1954 Constitution. What happened between Awolowo and Macpherson is similar to Buhari's actions to defeat Atiku Abubakar in the 2019 election. The pursuit of victory caused Buhari to assess himself before the People's Court. In doing this, Buhari showed that he was politically vulnerable. Remember that in taking you to the past, we do not forget today. Buhari on the 14th of February 2019, 2 days before the postponed 16 February 2019 elections, addressed Nigerians to sell himself to them. Buhari's message was transmitted by the Nigerian Television Authority, NTA, and other national stations. That broadcast gave Buhari advantage over Atiku because Atiku was not given the same platform close to the eve of election to express his promises and assurances like Buhari did. Remember, Buhari used the opportunity of that broadcast to give examples of the achievements of the government he led. He said the government he led had done well in infrastructure development, agriculture, manufacturing, and human capital development. Buhari in that broadcast called on the people to be wise in the choices they make, asking that promises made by the APC is realizable in the face of a resurgent economy. Buhari's broadcast 2 days before the postponed presidential election can be interpreted by the opposition as a president taking advantage of his position to use national stations to push his ideas without offering the same platforms to other candidates to have a right of reply. It is a similar argument that led to the establishment of the first television station in Africa in 1957. Recall that Anthony Anahoro of the Action Group, on the 1st of April 1953, on the floor of the House of Representatives, introduced a private members' bill demanding self-government in 1956 to the displeasure of members from northern Nigeria who felt Nigeria was not ripe for independence. The Council of Ministers, including 6 European officials, had earlier voted that no minister should join the debate. Action Group ministers led by Obafemi Awolowo in the council disagreed with this resolution. They resigned in line with the doctrine of collective responsibility. By this action, they moved the battle to the floor of Parliament. I am reflecting on the ideas of Obafemi Awolowo. Awo is the focus of this analysis. But from this analysis, you would understand the game of politics and power of the past. And I hope if you see Awolowo, you would recognize him. So we want to put the picture of Obafemi Awolowo on this broadcast. He's the subject of this analysis. So the tension caused by the motion led to members of the Action Group and the National Council of Nigeria and the Cameroon's NCNC walking out of Parliament. Nnamdi Azikiwe was the leader of NCNC, the National Council of Nigeria, and the Cameroons. NCNC had to change its names later, or the acronym later, after Cameroon voted. Southern Cameroon voted to join the other Cameroon. And that part of Cameroon today is fighting to be independent. They call themselves Ambazonia. So the walking out of Parliament by NCNC and Action Group members did not stop the North that constituted more than 50% of the membership of the House from using its majority to defeat Action Group's motion. The resolution of the North was that independence should come as soon as practicable. In protest against the defeat of the independence motion, observers outside Parliament booed the northern legislators when they came out. The visibly angry legislators from the north, having suffered from the Lagos crowd, took their grudges to the north. When they got home, they inflamed anger anger that led to the Kanu riots of 1953, riots that led to the death of persons of Southern extraction. It is claimed that the official figures of those killed is yet to be released, but the number is quite alarming. The killings were also caused by the planned visit of the action group to Kanu for political mobilization. The tension caused the authorities to ban the tour. The plot of members of action group led Awolowo, the plot of members of action group led by Obafemi Awolowo did not go down well with the colonial government. In an address on National Broadcasting Service, NBS, Governor Macpherson, in hard words, denounced the behavior of Action Group and its leadership. That broadcast provoked Awolowo to request the use of the same national platform to respond to his anger, but Awolowo was refused. That is why I started with a comparison between Buhari and Atiku towards the 2019 election. Buhari used NTA and other platforms to broadcast his campaign objectives, but Atiku didn't get the same platform. Macpherson used the MBS to attack Awolowo and the Action Group. Macpherson was the colonial governor at the time. But Awolowo wanted to reply him, but he was not given the MBS platform. Awolowo argued that he reserved the right to use the MBS to respond to a colonial governor who had poured insult on his party and the ideals its membership stood for. Awolowo's stance led to a debate on the possibility of allowing the regions own their broadcasting system for the sake of prosperity and fairness. In the debates that followed, Colonial Secretary Oliver Lintonton announced that the Constitution will be redrawn to provide for greater regional autonomy and for the removal of powers of intervention by the center in matters which could, without detriment to other regions, be placed entirely within regional competence. In the 1954 London Conference, it was agreed that broadcasting should be moved to the concurrent list, giving the regions right to establish radio and television stations. By 1957, the Action Group government in the Western region, led by its Premier Obafemi Awolowo, established the Western Nigerian Television station, the first in Africa. WNTV was an arm of Western Nigeria Broadcasting Corporation. Let's listen to Obafemi Awolowo on the day of the opening of Western Nigerian Television, WNTV, a historic day indeed.
Excellencies, Your Highnesses, ladies and gentlemen, a few events in my life have given me so much pleasure as to come before you tonight to open formally the first television network in Africa. Western Nigeria Television is already being emulated by other parts of this country, as well as a number of other African states. I know that you will all gain much from this great medium of mass information and instruction. It is a powerful influence for good. And I am confident that in due course, it will assist in making our great country even greater. Very soon, we and our partners will introduce commercial radio to Nigeria. And we have made careful plans that this medium too will be used for your benefit. With these few remarks, I have great pleasure in formally launching Western Nigeria Television, first in Africa. I ask you all to rejoice with my colleagues and me on this memorable occasion and to grasp with both hands the full advantages which this modern miracle offers.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.
That's Obafemi Awolowo in 1957, opening Western Nigeria Television. Broadcasting came to Nigeria in 1932 as retransmission of BBC program on a relay system, offering the opportunity to listen to the BBC in certain public locations over loudspeakers. You see how technology has changed? You know, you put loudspeakers in your house and you have wire connected to perhaps a BBC radio. So for you to have a radio, you have to be able to get the speaker and buy the wire connected to a BBC radio somewhere. It was called Radio Distribution Service, RODS. Knowing the power of radio as a propaganda machine, the colonial government in 1950 appointed T.W. Chalmers as the Director of Broadcasting in Nigeria. With his appointment came the name Nigerian Broadcasting Service, NBS. NBS launched radio stations in Ibadan, Lagos, Kaduna, Enugu, and Kano. You see, Ibadan has always been a hub of broadcasting. You know, some are saying Ibadan has about 40 radio stations now. Why? Ibadan can take more. Ibadan is a hub from day one. The first television station in Africa was established in Ibadan. So you see, Ibadan is a hub. After Lagos, Ibadan has the largest number of radio stations. So Ibadan is a hub. If you love radio, come and test your skills in Ibadan. Yes, MBS launched radio stations in Ibadan, Lagos, Kaduna, Enugu, and Kano. When the service was reorganized in April 1957 by Act of Parliament, it became the Nigerian Broadcasting Corporation, now Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria. So I hope I have been able to explain to you the politics that led to the establishment of the first television station in Africa, a television station established by the government of the Western region, led by Chief Obafemi Awolowo. So I will recommend these books of Awolowo to you, The Travails of Democracy, The Travails of Democracy and the Rule of Law. It is the second book under this general title, Adventures in Power, by Chief Obafemi Awolowo. It is the story of the violence and the anger displayed towards representative democracy and the rule of law and the dehumanizing brutalization that characterized the early post-independence years in Nigeria. If you read Awolowo's story in this book, you will see that nothing has really changed in Nigeria. In fact, some of the things that happened to Awolowo in the north were some of the things that were executed in Lagos State during the last elections. Clearly the same picture. Nothing has changed. The same character. So the traverse of democracy and the rule of law will make history come alive for you. So I recommend this book for you. It's a classic, beautifully written book by Chief Obafemi Awolowo. Get your copy by contacting us on WhatsApp. Udara Books WhatsApp numbers. You can also get it on udarabooks.com. So the title I'll be introducing to you before I go is this collection of Obafemi Awolowo's speeches. It's a 3-in-1 book. 3-in-1 book. Voice of reason, voice of wisdom, and voice of courage. They are collection of Obafemi Awolowo's speeches. If you are interested in the thoughts of Awo, get this collection. We are selling this for 8,500 at the moment. So get your copy before it runs out. So don't forget to join me on Monday for another package of this show. Join me at 2 p.m. on Monday. The program runs on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 2 p.m. But tomorrow I will be on Splash FM and we'll be streaming on our pages on Facebook. So join me tomorrow at 8 a.m. on this page for the Splash FM edition of State Affairs. I am Edmondo Bilo. I worked with Tosin Ayeni Oladele, Ayo Ashimolo, and Miriam Giwa. Enjoy your weekend. Make sure you read a book. See you soon.
State Affairs with Edmondo Bilo is live.